I think this theme, a world of thoughts, I think it's such a beautiful expression that Martinus uses quite often in his books. A world of thoughts. We think of this world. We don't really know where it is. We can't really see it with our physical eyes. And we don't really know where it comes from either. But somehow we know we have it. We have all these feelings and thoughts, all this inside of us. But is it inside of us? Is it in our brains, like some people think all our thoughts are in our brains, are produced from the brain? Or are this thought word, is it somewhere else, far away? Or is it in our energy field around us, maybe also inside of us, between all the atoms and the electrons inside of us? The best way is maybe to say that it isn't in space and time. It's beyond somehow. It's in another dimension, Martinus says also sometimes. And he also says that we actually always are in this thought world. All our life experience is really in this thought world, in our inner world. And we create, all of us, our own inner world. And we think that we live in a physical world, and actually you look very physical when I look at you now, but in a way everything in the physical world is only movements and waves and frequencies, says Martinus. There has never been a living soul in the physical world, although we all the time have this experience of being in a physical world. It's just an illusion, he says, but it's an illusion that is real. And we know it because if I pinch my arm, I can really feel it. So it's this principle of perspective that makes our senses translate these waves and frequencies and movements into what we perceive as a physical world. And this is not always so easy to understand. We are so used to being in this world of time and space. So going into this thought world is really going into something that we always have with us, and we are always in it, but we are not so aware that we are inside of this, or in this thought world, maybe we could say. So I will try to see if I can give some more inspiration to get to know this inner world. And we can start with seeing, Martinus uses this expression often, a world of thoughts, which in my imagination I already see somehow a cloud with all colors and maybe a bit like this. But he also uses another concept, consciousness, medvetande, bevissthet. This is maybe the most common word he uses for this inner world, for our thought world. And consciousness is also actually in mainstream science now, scientists are also doing research on this consciousness, and they don't know what it is really. Everybody says they don't know what it is, but they can measure it, but it's only here in the brain, and they can measure electric activity, but that is also, again, only the outside. The inside is really our experience, which they can't measure. It's really a subjective experience to have this thought world. And then he uses this word, psyche. Actually, in Leavitt's book 4 to 7, he uses this word more. Maybe he was more talking to psychologists. I don't know. Psychology is really the science of the psyche. But there also, there's a lot of thinking and theorizing and trying out different things, but it's not really the science Martinus gives us with his spiritual science. Another word, which is, he uses it sometimes also, soul, maybe more in the context of body, soul, spirit, or body, mind, spirit is also a way to express it, which is also used actually in other fields, not in mainstream science really, because the soul is also something that is a little like this. You don't know what it really is. Mentality is another word he uses. And a mental field, he says something. It's a mental field. And then we think maybe more of intelligence. And I think the English word mind is something that we use more and more nowadays. And mind that word is very difficult to translate to Swedish. And Danish, I think also, it can mean the senses or the thoughts or the soul or the spirit or the intellect, and often it's translated as brain, and probably because the mainstream science is so much into the brain, and they think that everything is in the brain somehow. And then he uses also this expression, the spiritual world, den andliga världen, den andliga värld på dansk, which I guess is also, he calls it his spiritual science, really. It's also a word that is maybe a little more towards the old religious way. You think of spirituality, spirit, you think maybe of dead people and their spirit is moving somewhere. And it's also a bit something that mainstream science doesn't know anything about, and ordinary people maybe have some feeling sometimes, but this is also maybe, I know when I talked to some friends not so long ago who are not into Martinus cosmology and the spiritual world, but where is that? Is that somewhere up there in heaven? Or we always try to make us an image, actually, of what it is. But it's really difficult in a way. But I think we all do. All the time when we read Martinus, we make our own images, our own inner world of this concept. I found some articles where he is very good in explaining this is the spirit of God upon the face of the water, which is actually this symbol number 1 in his symbol collection. Here he says in this article, consciousness, a mental field around an I with its abilities and talents. Here thoughts, feelings, knowledge, desires, and will, the experience of the being's collected fate, are formed. So here it describes it also as a mental field around an I, and we could maybe just see at this symbol, we could see this as the eye of God, but the eye of all of us also, and then there is this field of energies around us, the spiritual world. And it's not just our thoughts, but also our feelings and our knowledge, what we know, what we have experienced, what we desire and long for. Everything that we have experienced is somehow collected in this inner world, in this spiritual world. And in a way, we make our word picture, in a way, out of all the experiences that we have. And that is also why on Earth now there are so many different ways of interpreting and seeing how does life work, and what is life actually, and how is everything connected with everything else. This is something that we maybe with the help of Martinus can get more and more into. I also read somewhere in a magazine that this thought field around us makes the I appear as alive. It's also a good expression, because without this, the I, we would never experience the I, and it wouldn't experience anything. This thought field is really what makes it alive. And here we have more explanations from Martinus in this article. All manifestation and every movement in matter arises from an impulse from a living being's superconsciousness. The impulse is brought to the being's subconsciousness by the primordial desire or the mother energy. And through the subconscious bodies, the being becomes conscious in the impulse and perceives it as desire or wish. And if you haven't read so much from Martinus's work, maybe this is a bit strange an explanation, but if we look at this symbol, the living being, number 1, we can see what he described in this text. Here we have the I. It's symbolized here with the white triangle. And from here, the primordial desire, the desire to experience life, to have a life experience, it comes down here and it somehow goes into this violet field, which he calls the mother energy, which is really the mother of all these other energies that we have. And there are these 6 basic energies. These are like the spiral centers, and this is where the mother energy is somehow split up into these 6 fields. And we could maybe imagine it like when you have a crystal and white sunlight come through it, all these colors, the spectrum of the white come. And this then goes into what he calls, this is a super consciousness, and down here we have the subconsciousness. And here are these bodies that we use to experience and to manifest in the world. The instinct body here, the red, and here we have the energy of gravity and the orange color. The yellow is the energy of feeling, and the green is the energy of intelligence. Blue, the energy of intuition, and here we have the energy of memory. Memory is what you say, yeah, or bliss also. And these are somehow an extension of from the I down through the super consciousness into the subconsciousness. And this is all also in a way our thought world, and this orange circle symbolizes our physical body. And inside of it we have this super conscious structure, and the white in the behind this cross is actually also the I. So in a way you could almost imagine that this orange thing here, this is down here, like the base of this. It's like the furthest away in a way from the I, if you can say it in space like that. It's like a space suit, he says sometimes, because really we are all the time in this dimension, in the thought world, in the consciousness. He has different ways of explaining or using words to explain these bodies. Our spiritual bodies, he calls them also, and these are the ones we have to experience life. In the physical world, we can do things with our physical body, but in the spiritual world, we do things with our spiritual bodies, which we don't know where they are, and we don't really know them so well, but we know there is something going on inside of us. He calls them often organs. And in the beginning, when you read Martinus, you can think organs, you think of the heart and the lungs and so on. But these are also spiritual organs. And also our organs also have a spiritual body, actually. And they are also an I, all our cells also. And also if we go out into the macrocosmos, there is also everything is alive, really. This other word, the psychic or spiritual structures, he call it. Psychic and spiritual structures. We have to make it somehow into an image for us so that we can have an inner picture. And this symbol is maybe a good way to grasp them. He also uses extension organs. It's an extension from the eye, if I do this around me, from the eye down into the psychic world, into the spiritual world, but then also into the physical world. He also uses this word, thought bodies. These are the bodies we need to think. All these energies we do need for that. And bodies of manifestation, both a manifestation in the physical world, but also in our spiritual world, in our inner world. We need these bodies to manifest. And the spiritual bodies, more or less, they function through our physical body. We can't see them, but we can see the reaction from our thought world in our physical bodies. He also uses this temporary organ structures, and they are temporary. Our physical body we have to change many times. he doesn't say how many times, but it really needs all the time a better physical body for every life that we have. Our physical bodies, they also change all the time. We also have this new experience, and old stuff that we don't need anymore, it somehow dissolves. So they get renewed all the time, but they also have a lifespan. He says they come into existence and they grow and grow, and then they go down again, they degenerate, and then they are born again. And what makes this possible, it's only one of these bodies at a time that is changed, is because in the superconsciousness we have the spiral centers, and they are eternal. They are there all the time. So all the time we have this ability to build a new physical and also these psychic bodies. And another way to describe it is devices for sending and receiving energies. So for us to communicate, and for God to communicate with us, and for us to communicate with each other and also with our inner world, we need these devices so that we can send our energies into other realms, maybe we could say that, and also to receive energies. And this sounds a little like the poles, you know, the masculine and the feminine pole. They are also in the superconsciousness somewhere there. He didn't depict them in this symbol, but they are also there. And also the talent kernels that we have built up through all our lives, which are also, in a way, almost eternal, but they also change a little all the time when we go through the big spiral cycle. And then we have, he calls it also tools for experience. So these are our tools to experience, but also to manifest, really. And what is, I guess, also very important is electric bodies. The whole thought world is actually electric, all these different frequencies. And from the outside, it looks only like electricity, if you can measure it in the brain, for example. And all our bodies are actually, it works through electricity, but that is really our spiritual world that is moving and working in the space between all the electrons and atoms. So this electric world is what we are trying to understand with these. I have some quotes also now where he describes this process. He says also that when we get a thought, it comes from this blind spot, from the X1, he calls it also, from this blind spot, he says, from this sacred place. This is really where all the everything arises from this place. And then I have some quotes where we could maybe try to understand a little more about this. This is from Leavitt's book 5. This I and its world of thoughts constitute that which is really alive in the organism. Since this is invisible indeed, seems immaterial on the physical plane, it has been expressed as the living being's spirit. This is the only thing that is really alive, he says, the I and its world of thoughts. So what we usually think is that this body is alive, but it is really alive only because we have all these thought bodies moving and helping us to move this physical body. And here he says, it's an article, when you, for instance, notice another person's atmosphere, you concentrate on this person's spiritual side. Atmosphere, he uses this word here. That's maybe a way to, you somehow feel, you don't see it really with your physical eyes, but you sense it somehow. And that, I guess, is with our, especially with our body of feeling, that we can somehow feel the energy around people. And we are more or less aware of this, I think. We don't often think about it, but when we feel happy to being with some people, I guess it's also, we feel this atmosphere, which is also, in a way, a communication, because all these this world of thoughts is moving all the time and changing, and maybe moving into somebody else we are talking with, and this person's thought field also comes into us. It's really, there aren't so strong borders between us that when we look at us physically, we are separate. But when we are together, we are actually all in a bigger energy field. We also actually live in the energy field, the thought field of our planet. But this is maybe how mainstream science sees. It's called the cosmic unconsciousness. There we can see also the physical body, but we don't see the superconsciousness, because this is something we can't know, because it's immaterial, we can't measure it, and we can only know it through our own experience. That we have an I, we are an I, Martinus says. And this is not something that scientists talk about in science, in mainstream science. It's really not, because it's something that we use all the time. I do this, I say this, I did this. But you never think really, what is it really? This is not in the day consciousness, maybe we could say, in their awareness. And here he has also made all the different energies, the intelligence and the yellow energy of feeling and so on, instinct and intuition. But we don't really know where it is. Through Martinus we can know a little more about it. But all this is like it's just floating around, like a lot of things actually are in all of us. And they don't really know. The symbol in the middle, the cross, for Martinus, it's always the perfect structure, the perfect psychic structure in us, the superconscious. But in mainstream science, the cross, or in people who only think we have one life, it's really the symbol of death. So it changes a lot when you get into the spiritual science. And then he is quite lively in his imagination sometimes, Martinus. I thought this was quite interesting. He says, we live in bomb-secure rooms. The mental sphere of terrestrial mankind is currently such an experimental cellar or a cosmic chemical test laboratory where terrestrial mankind is allowed to mix thought matters in all possible ways and see what the result becomes. So this is where we are, and it goes on. Currently, these experiments are done quite aimless in the terrestrial laboratory. They mix their thought matter in order to gain profit and power and fame as a result, but instead achieve only a lot of explosions that make the laboratory shake and in its foundations and acts crushing and maiming on many of the laboratory assistants. So it's really serious in a way. Here he says they mix their thought matter. And Martinus really says that our thoughts are also made of spiritual matter, of these energies, these 6 basic energies. It's also something, a new thought for many of us when we start to read that our thoughts are also matter, that they really can influence, because they are also in this world of matter. And now that we, in a way, theoretically at least know that we are always in this world of thought matter, it's easier to understand. We can look at this symbol also, which is a good way to understand how these different bodies change through a spiral. The eternal world plan, and we see here this spiral that he usually also shows in other symbols, where we go from the mineral kingdom into the plant kingdom and into the animal kingdom, and we move into the true human being kingdom, and then we have the wisdom kingdom and the kingdom of intuition, and then we go back again, and then we don't come into the same, but we go into the next spiral. And here we can see, maybe we can start here where we are in the animal kingdom. This is how our different spiritual bodies are developed at this stage where we are now. Maybe we are a bit further here, but this is only one of the beings here. we see that what our body of gravity is really the dominant body that we use, and the body of feeling is slowly growing in us. It moves like this, and the intelligence body is quite new right now, but we still use the energy of intelligence a lot. This instinct body is declining, and also this memory body. And here, the one that is latent, the body of intuition, here it's somehow inside of this super consciousness of the Godhead, we could say there. But then when we go on in our development, we can see what happens when we get our cosmic consciousness and we come into the real human kingdom of. Here we see that the body of feeling is the one that is dominant, that is carrying our day consciousness, and that this body of gravity is declining, and also the instinct body. And here it's the body of memory that is latent, and these two are growing. And then we go on, and if we look at the other side, we can see here that the body of intuition is the one that is dominant. Here already somewhere we don't come back into the physical world. We don't incarnate again. We live our lives here for a long time through these spiritual kingdoms, and this is where it culminates really. Then it goes declines again. You can see how this body also declines more and more, and when we come back, the next spiral, when we come, then it again is latent. So this is how our bodies develop and decline through this big spiral cycle. And where we are now, I guess we are all, our gravity bodies are somehow declining more and more, and our body of feeling, which really is a body of love, he says, that's it, it's the one that is growing in us. And in the spiritual world, we only have our spiritual bodies to connect to other people, but we don't have to talk and we don't have to write things anymore. We can just have a thought and the other people around us see it. So we have this direct communication. And this, maybe we should also think about, we have to be in the physical world so that we can learn to think in a way that we don't are destructive, that we are life-giving with our thoughts. And this is really only possible in the physical world where we meet resistance. So when we come into the spiritual worlds and go on there, all our thoughts have to be life-giving so that the love energy also can develop, and we can go on living until it's time again to renew this possibility of cosmic consciousness and also our love, faculty of love, maybe we could say there. So all this has to be renewed over and over again. And here in this physical world, it's really where we learn to think in a good way. But let's look again at some places where Martinus describes this process of thinking. All thinking takes place through impulses which are triggered by the I through its superconsciousness. These impulses are only quite ordinary energy impulses. In their first state, they do not at all constitute any form of thought. Only through a reprocessed organization of these impulses is the I capable of binding the surrounding spiritual matter. Of course, this goes very fast, so we never experience actually this phase where it comes from the I and it's just an ordinary energy impulse. It's not really has no shape really, and we can't really feel it until we have bound some of the surrounding spiritual matter, he says. So we actually create our thoughts from the I, and through our superconsciousness, from all our talent kernels, everything that we have experienced is really giving a shape to these thoughts that we create. And it goes on here. It's also from Leavitt's book 6. While the physical matter appears in a solid, liquid, and gaseous state, the spirit appears in a state we have to call radiating. This radiating state is mainly outside of the domain of vibrations or movements that are directly accessible for physical perception. And here this word radiating, which he also uses a lot, that we actually radiate all our thoughts, and we also receive like he actually says sometimes that our brain is like a receiver, a transformer. It can receive spiritual waves and more get them transformed so that we can experience them in our day consciousness. And at the same time, we also send out, radiate these frequencies as a way to communicate our inner thoughts. Yeah, it's not so easy to find words for this. And also that these spiritual matter, it can only be sensed actually with spiritual senses, with our spiritual bodies. We can't see it with our eyes and we can't touch it really. And that's why some people think it doesn't exist, that it's just an illusion. Some people say also, but we know better, I think, now. So this is also from Leavitt's book. In our thought world, all our wishes and desires come into existence. Here we create the first images of our ideas and conceptions, images of our longing, sorrows, and worries, as well as our joys and encouragements, images of our knowledge and insights, images of our character and our way of living, and so on. All these images constitute the details in our thought world, in our mind, we could say also. And here he is really saying that everything is images in a way inside of us, which we can maybe, we can all see things, images inside of us. When we say a word like an apple, some of us see an apple right away, and for some people maybe it takes a while. And this is not with our physical eyes, it's really with our inner eyes, we could say. So the whole thought world is really full of images that we collect in this way. And as these thought images in their innermost nature can only exist in psychic matter, which we now know as mesocosmic electricity, it is not possible to perceive them with physical senses, since these can register all psychic or electric matter only as invisible force. And this is where electricity, electric matter can be explained. We can only sense it as it does something. It is a force. It makes it possible for us to move also this physical body and to move our thoughts and to have this power in a way to create and to get impulses from outside. But the living being's experience of life is not only a revealing in physical matter of impulses from within, it is also a revealing of impulses from without. So we also receive, we send and we receive, and through the physical senses, the different outer physical phenomena become image forms. So we take them in. Then these are then transformed into electric impulses, which by the psychic senses or electric organs are transformed to the electric image forms that constitute the being's thought forms. The collected combination of these thought forms constitute the psyche or mentality of the being. So there is all this transformation going on from in this physical world, which is really only frequencies. We use the electric bodies to get these thought images from outside, and we create an image of something that is we think is outside of us, but it's really inside of us, in our thought world, in our psyche. This is something we can think a lot about and try to grasp more and more, I think. I have also here, the consciousness or life experience of the living being is reality only a permanent interaction between the reactions of its inner and outer worlds, contact with each other. The being experiences these reactions through the structure of its psychic or electric senses as its thought world, its psyche or consciousness. So it's all the time actually this sending out energy which goes through somebody else and comes back into me as something that I experience, and then this experience goes through me and goes out. So all the time, in a way, we are like this symbol, like this one here, the eternal body. We send out and we receive. It's like the karma waves, and all our thoughts are also in this movement all the time. And they are actually in constant change. Thought, through the senses, all experience and impressions from the outer world encounter the combination of energy impulses of the being's inner world. Impulses from earlier experiences of the outer world, impulses which determine the being's consciousness and way of living today. So that's why we also all have our own thought world, because everything that comes towards me that I perceive as something, it goes through my super consciousness. I try not to imagine it up here, and it goes through all the experiences that I have from earlier life, and things and thoughts and feelings I have, and it goes up to the eye, and there it goes down, and again through this, and it has somehow, it has been turned up here, and it comes out as something that I radiate out. And it goes out into somebody else, maybe if I talk to somebody, and then this process goes on all the time. We take in things and we perceive them through our own material that we have in our superconsciousness, all the talent kernels, all the experiences, and also it comes out through all our experiences. So that's why sometimes we can't really understand each other, and sometimes we can really understand each other because we are somehow on the same wavelengths, maybe you could say. So then maybe another question is, what are thoughts made of? And we know that everything in the universe is alive. We know the solar system and our planet, and we are alive, and our organs, our cells, and the atoms, and we go further down, and if we go further and further and further and further down, there somehow are some living beings that are the material for our thoughts. It's not just an energy, it's a lot of eyes, a lot of living beings that we use for our thoughts. And this is something that is not so easy to take into your thought world, but we could maybe try to imagine that we are also a super macrocosmic being's thought material. Not really our body so much as our consciousness, what we have in our thought world. So we are actually also somebody's thoughts. Then maybe it's easier to understand. And what then, it's really important then what we think, what we give life to, because in a way it's really that we give a possibility for discarnated, very super microcosmic beings to incarnate and become the living beings that make our thoughts. And one way to maybe understand this a little is this beautiful symbol, the what is it called in English? The human body as a stellar system. And here we can imagine that this is an electron inside of us. So we go deep down through our organs, cells, atoms, and we put ourselves on an electron, which is really very small, so we have to become very small. And then when we look up into our universe, our body is really like a universe, and we see a sky like what we see at night here when the stars are, and there's a lot of emptiness in between. We don't really see a man floating like this, but this is really like a symbol to show us that our whole body is also only made of a lot of suns, it's really only light, which is also electric, and between all the atoms, that's where these energies, our thought matter is living its life. And when I think about it, it always gets a little like this in my brain, because it's so far away and it's so much going on all the time. So for us to be able to have a thought, we need to go down very far into the super microcosmic world. Maybe we can also see it a little better on this symbol, because here are the colors of the different energies also in this symbol. We can see around here in this area we have the gravity energy, and here we really need it. It's like a fiery, warming energy which we need for our digestion, and also to move and to be able to move. Actually, we need it, but it is concentrated here. So here these thoughts, they should accumulate somehow, this energy here. Different thoughts that we have go to different parts in our body, he says. And it's not something that we have to think about, now I have to have a thought that gets into this. It's not really like this. This is automatically in a way. Our different thoughts go to the regions where they need these energies and these suns to incarnate in a way. Then we can see this part here, the chest and the lungs and the heart and the blood and the breathing system actually is the energy of feeling. This is where the real human kingdom is also slowly incarnating in us, he says. So that's the energy which dominates there. And in the head here, we can see the green, the intelligence energy. That is the main energy to vitalize the brain and the nerve system. Maybe we could say it like that. And then we have intuition in our sexual organs. And now we know that the intuition body is declining. The old, from an earlier spiral, is declining. And we have a new cosmic consciousness starting to grow. Somehow here in the brain, it will someday, when we are ready, also give us cosmic consciousness. But it's slowly growing. And this, I guess, we need a little to understand this cosmology of Martinus. And we have the light indigo, I guess he says in English. It's actually our skeleton and our hair and our nails, the energy there that gives the life to this. And the red is all the skin and the muscles, the instinct energy that gives these life force, all these different regions in our body. Yeah, the energy which form our thought create the corresponding physical areas in our organism. We create conditions for microbeings to incarnate. It's not so easy to understand, but we can try. And then he has this beautiful sentence, our spirit or consciousness floats in the void between the atoms. It sounds nice. And so we see it's really a collaboration between many spirals so that we can have this thought world that we can experience and we can manifest. Here we can see a microcosmic stellar system in the organic atomic world. And here he explains also that this could be a sun, and we would experience, maybe if we look at the sky, we wouldn't see the sun at night, but a star, and it has 2 planets, and all these other are further away, but the whole universe is actually all the way up and all the way down. It still are these physical structures, bodies. But now we can also think that this is the atom kernel, the atom, Martinus calls it, and these are 2 electrons. And the energies always come from the atom and come to these electrons. Exactly like the sun is a big energy for our life here on this planet. All the energies come through these atoms or through the suns, which is, he actually says, it's very similar in the microcosmic as in the macrocosmos. And here, the atom sends energies of consciousness from the spiritual plane to the physical plane and keeps it alive. And different energies to different regions in the body. With our thought, we make incarnation possible. So all the energies come through these and they go to different parts in our bodies. And here he also writes, with their thinking, people should learn to regulate and hold their organism in order. This they should do primarily by not hurt and injure outwardly, and then they can themselves overcome the diseases they get through infection or in other ways. We should learn to regulate and hold our organism in order. And it's really the way we behave in life. We shouldn't hurt and injure outwardly, and not inwardly either, actually, to all our inner organs. Because when we think not life-giving but death-giving thoughts, terrible things happen. It's like an explosion and fire inside of us. And we can see when we have good thoughts, life-giving thoughts, this is what it looks like then. Here we have the atom again and the two electrons, and this is in this region here where the gravity energy is dominating. And here the right amount of gravity energy comes through to these two, which could also be seen as planets, which constitute actually our physical body also. And when the right amount comes, not too little and not too much, then there is this harmonious energy in the body, in between these electrons. And then all the other energies should also come in the right amount. But we can see what happens when we get angry and heated, he says. We can see what happens when too much energy of gravity comes here. It's too much. They explode or they are driven apart, he says. And this is what we experience in our bodies as that we don't feel well, we get sick. But inside of us, if we could go down and see what it looks like, it would be like a fire, an inflammation. What he says in this book also is something that we could maybe try to work on. He says we should learn this thing of going down into our microcosmos, to be there and just to try to be there. It's not so easy because how do you do it? We have to find a way to do it, to have our thoughts concentrated somehow inside of us, which is sometimes we do it when we do some kind of mindfulness or meditation or prayer. We just can sit still and have our consciousness inside of us, and just giving this energy, this focus on the micro beings inside of us, I think is very healing. And I think he says also we will someday learn how to heal ourselves just by our thoughts. We can't do it by trying to do here, but we have to go into the microcosmic world to do this. There's so much else you could say about this, but I will take this picture now. There is, in an article, Martinus also writes that we should see ourselves as a gardener, maybe. And to have a nice garden, you have to pick out the weed and feed and water and so on, so that the things that you want to grow there, they can grow there. And we should also be like a gardener in our thought world, he says. All the thoughts that so easily come, it goes so quick, and usually, oh, how shall I be able to focus, and what is weed and what is not? But somehow we learn it through life, and we have so many lives still to learn more and more, to take out all these death-giving thoughts. I don't know if that's a good translation for that word, but the life-giving energies, the positive energies, we should really try to give more and more attention, and the others will somehow, like when you don't water a weed, it slowly gets more and more like this. Yeah, so this is maybe something that could happen. So it's a lot of work, actually. But it starts with becoming aware of how important our thoughts is. What do we want to fill our thought world with? And since the theme of this week is great thoughts in daily life, I thought I would pick out some thoughts that you would like to have inside of your thought world. One is, our life is a conversation with God. I think this is a nice thought to have. You could just have it, and yeah, it's all the time, even when we just sit still, or when we go in nature, or when we meet each other. It's really all the time a conversation with God. Sometimes he said it's only me and God, everything around me. Another one could be good to have. We meet God everywhere in our environment. And we know this when we have read Martinus, maybe for many years, but still we forget it all the time. So it's also something that we have to try to get this more and more into us so that it comes automatically. Like for a cosmic conscious person, Martinus, he knew all the time that he met God everywhere. And he could also see God in everyone. We try sometimes, and sometimes we actually do experience this, but sometimes it's our own thought bodies are not really developed as much so that we can really feel this, see this. And also that we meet God in our inner world. And then I guess this is what we also do when we get into prayer or meditation or mindfulness, that we are inside of us, because everywhere inside of us also we can meet God. So maybe that could be a good way to end this lecture. Thank you so much.